question. Some people have referred to you and Alex Jones as the biggest, most famous conspiracy theorist in the world. I've watched your career rise. I've watched Alex's career rise. Love the stuff he did early on with John Ronson, going into Bohemian Grove. He's interviewed some fascinating characters like Freeway Ricky Ross, who I've interviewed for one of my books. What do you think about Alex getting deplatformed, and what's all that about?
Well, first of all, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm a conspiracy researcher, which is a different thing. And it's interesting, Sean, that the term conspiracy theory and conspiracy theorist came into widespread use because of the CIA. In the 1960s, when they were trying to discredit people that didn't believe that a single bullet went through several people and that killed President Kennedy, the single bullet theory, that they were trying to discredit them. They wrote to major media organizations or contacted them. You can see the document on the internet in the 1960s, urging them to use the terms conspiracy theorists and conspiracy theorists to discredit people who were questioning the Kennedy assassination. And all these years later, these journalists, the ones with the backbones vibrating, they're still trying to discredit people by calling them conspiracy theories and what they say conspiracy theories. And 99% of them will not know that originated with the CIA. Too busy watching the newsroom telly. So if you look at Alex, there's many things that I agree with Alex about. There's many things I don't agree with him about. I didn't agree with his support for Trump, for instance. But anyway, my point of view, and is first of all that whatever people may say about Alex Jones, he has communicated an enormous amount of information that people needed to hear. I might, not completely agree on the way that the angle he comes from and how he interprets it. That's the word I'm looking for, interprets it. But who cares? The basics of what he's been saying all these years, as he's communicated it, people needed to hear. And I have a simple philosophy. You let people hear all opinion and all possibility, and then you have the basic human decency and the absence of arrogance to say, there's all the information, make of it what you will, and you have every right to decide what to make of it. That's an open, human, free society where all information is available, and then people are respected in their right to interpret that information as they see fit. That is not the goal, which is ensuring that only what the authorities want people to see and hear do they see and hear. So Alex Jones and his deplatforming, and I'll be honest, I think Alex could have been a bit more streetwise here and there and not walked into their traps. But never mind. He has an absolute right to his freedom of speech. And this is a big point, Sean, here. There's a key line. And that line decides whether we live in a tyranny or whether we live in a free society. And that line is the point of delivery of information. If you censor before, after the point of delivery, in other words, if you're calling for terrorism or you're calling for violence or burning a house down, there are laws to deal with that. But those laws kick in after the point of delivery. You have to say it, and then we'll deal with it. What that means is why this line is so crucial. It means that under those circumstances, no authority is given the right to decide what people see and hear. Because people see and hear everything, and then it's dealt with if it needs dealing with. once you come to where we are now, and this is where Alex Jones is part of this, what's happened to him, is you come before the point of delivery. Now, once you are censoring information before the point of delivery, you have now given authority the power to decide what the public see and hear. And of course, what has happened, is you start out by saying, oh, we must ban people calling for terrorism. Well, first of all, do you want to know who's calling for terrorism or not? So you want them to say it in public, and then you deal with it. If you force them underground, they're still saying it. It's just you're not seeing it anymore. It's ridiculous, right? So once you start, we must stop, incitement to terrorism. And most people who are not streetwise enough to see where it's leading say, oh, yeah, I can understand that. But then it starts, and then it goes beyond that. Now it's fake news. Well, who decides what's fake news? Well, we do. On what basis? Well, whether we want you to see it or not. Yeah, okay. And so if it were genuinely wanting to ban fake news, then there would be no BBC News, there'd be no CNN, there'd be no MSNBC, there'd be no Fox News, none of it. But it's not about banning fake news. It's about using that as an excuse to ban what you don't want people to see. Then you have hate speech. That was the next in line. Hate speech. We must ban hate speech. Who decides what hate speech is? Well, we do. On the basis of what? Well, what we want people to see and hear. Right, okay, gotcha. And so it goes on. And now we're having this criteria for banning of whether it is harmful. Not if it's illegal. No, is it harmful? So what do you call harmful? Well, saying anything that we don't want people to hear. So it goes on. So what has happened with Alex Jones and many others now is gathering all the time. They are censoring him before the point of delivery. And that's what they want to do to bring about this situation where they only have people seeing and hearing what they want them to see and hear. Now, I had a strange. I was demonetized, as they say, from YouTube a long time ago, I'm subject to what they call shadow banning, where you can actually post it, but then they make sure it's not seen by anything like the number of people it would normally be seen by. And then I was banned by Facebook, just banned by Facebook, out of nowhere, no reason, nothing. And quite a lot of people kicked off on Facebook about what are you bloody doing, and out of nowhere, 7 days later, they just put me back up and said, oh, it was a mistake. Well, it wasn't a mistake, because if people hadn't have kicked off, I'd still be banned. So what's going to happen when the trigger comes out? I don't know. That's going to be fun. But you see, we've got a choice. We can speak our truth and let the world be what it is, or we can keep censoring ourselves, and then drip, 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 drip. More and more is censored. The criteria for censorship gets wider and wider, and eventually you're banned anyway. So we might as well tell the truth straight up off the bat, and then what happens. So that's what I do, and how they'll react, I don't know. And frankly, I don't particularly care, because if I did, I'm giving them power.
If David does get completely deplatformed after the release of The Trigger in September this year, September 11, his website, davidicke.com, link is in the description box below this video. Whatever's happening in the news, he puts regular videos up, links to stories from alternative media. Highly recommend you keep track of what he's doing on his website.
Oh, there's also the Renegade, a movie. Movie's come out, Renegade, which is a feature-length movie about my life and work. It's not long come out, available through davidicke.com on a number of different platforms. People have tried to get it banned, But when the platforms have watched it, they can't find a reason to ban it. But it had some of the premieres have been banned. But it's a film that shows me as I am and not as I'm painted. And also, there's an enormous amount of information in there, which is accessible to people who know nothing about this information. It's really accessible. It's not all deep on all of it. It's very accessible. So that's available as well.
What was the reason they cited for banning you from Australia, David?
Because this tells you something, Sean. It shows you, this force is extremely arrogant, but a lot of its arrogance is trying to convince itself of its omnipotence as well as trying to convince everyone else. And that ban from Australia, 4 hours before my plane left, having given me a visa to speak in the September before, months and months before, really was an indication of how frightened this cabal is of information. I was told by the immigration minister, David Coleman. He must have been a journalist once because his backbone was vibrating like crazy when the Israel far-right front in Australia told him to ban me. One bloke, basically, telling 25 million Australians what they can and cannot hear. Disgusting arrogance. But anyway, it's more than arrogance, like I say. And another reason, two reasons they gave, or he gave, because the ministry gave me the visa, because they couldn't find a reason not to. I've been there 10 times, not a problem. But now suddenly 4 hours before my plane left, it's a problem. It cost us £30,000 in all the cost of putting the tour on, which then suddenly, 4 hours notice, gone. They have no comeback for that. They don't have to reimburse us or anything. And two of the other reasons were my views on vaccines and my view that the human-caused global warming is a hoax, something I've been saying for a very long time, and pointing out there was a reason why they were doing it, and that reason is now becoming clear, becoming public. Anyway, but so here you have, just take the vaccines and human-caused global warming. You have the big pharma cartel globally that basically can say what it likes. It can claim what it likes. It controls the medical professions via the medical associations. It controls government health policy. Whatever you have, it's a scalpel or a drug. If every problem looks like a nail, every answer looks like a hammer. So there you go with that. They can say what they like. They can advertise on television. All the medical correspondents come on repeating big pharma propaganda. And yet one man going into Australia, talking for 4 hours each time in 6 Australian cities about many connected subjects, but say vaccines. He's a problem. I'm a problem. That's the scale of fear they have for information. Because when the vaccine information is put for public attention, the big pharma cartel cannot answer it. Therefore, it wants to shut it up. It's a very simple thing. If you can't win, this is how they work. If you can't win the debate, don't have it. So if you want to know what's the agenda, what are big parts of the agenda, simply look at what you can't have an alternative opinion about. You get censored and banned for saying, or abuse for saying, calculated abuse. And then you've got human-caused global warming. Every news bulletin in the frickin' world, year after year after year, we're all gonna die. Okay? One man coming into Australia and saying, we ain't. That's a problem. So we're going to ban him. Oh, don't let him say that. Just Take a breath and look at that. The totality of their control of information, and they're terrified of one guy speaking at 6 meetings. That's the scale of fear they have of information to challenge the official narrative, and that's why this hysteria of censorship is happening ever faster.
I know a lot of good people who campaign for causes, and it seems when a cause reaches a certain level, it gets co-opted, and the people manipulating the public channel that energy into something then that they can profit from. So with the global warming hoax, how is that scam run?
Runs like this. You use the Nazi technique. You keep repeating the lie, and eventually people will believe it. Well, everyone knows that, mate. Why? Because that's all everyone's heard. And you find among the general population, despite the constant propaganda, how many people don't buy it? Because they've got a brain they put on active duty, and they can see through it. Anyway, this is what happened. Is that I said long time ago that human-caused global warming is a hoax for a reason. Because you just say it's a hoax, people are obviously going to ask you, well, why is it a hoax? And you have to be able to answer that. Otherwise, you've got no credibility. And there has to be a reason. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a hoax. And the reason is to justify the centralization of power to save the planet. And we already have the blueprints for that in the process, called Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030 out of the UN, which seek to centralize power and control over the fine detail of people's lives, control of water, control of energy, control of everything to save the planet, right? This is why the hoax is being played. Then you have this lady, Ocasio-Cortez, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a politician who's not long been elected out of New York, who's come out with something called the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal is based on the fact that, according to her, we're going to pass the point where the Earth can be saved 12 years from now. Well, sorry, what about the points we passed before, where we might be able to do anything after this point? But actually, now it's 12 years hence. Well, that's a good thing, isn't it? Because we all should be dead now or going on there. I mean, Al Gore, the only thing you know about Al Gore is if his lips are moving, he's bloody lying. And he's been the front man for this thing. I mean, hello. Look at the history of Al Gore. If he ever told the truth, he would genetically implode. Right? And you believe in him. Anyway, what happened what happens is her Green Deal demands centralization of power and control over people's lives. Then you've got these people in London, this Extinction Rebellion that's recently shut some streets in London to demand action over human-caused global warming. And they're demanding the same centralization of power. And basically, it's a form of Marxism, communism, you call it fascism, just names, same thing, tyranny, that is being imposed or sought to be imposed through the excuse that we've got to save the world. And what they have done to young children through the propaganda in the schools to frighten little kids that the world's going to end in their lifetimes is absolutely disgusting, and it's child abuse. And it's been a few phrases I've used over the years, like what you hate you become and what you fight you become. And I see these anti-haters full of hate. I see the anti-fascists full of fascism, and you see these free society people imposing a tyranny. Because it's based on this. I am right. End of story. That's where their mentality goes. I am right. Now, everything comes from this. Because I am right, what I say should be imposed on everyone else, because if they don't agree with me, then they are wrong by definition because they say something different to me, and I am right. Goes like this too. I am right, therefore, why should people that say something different to me have freedom of speech? It's like one person said about me once, what is the benefit in allowing him to speak? He actually said that. It was printed in the Independent newspaper magazine. And that person will think he's a, paragon of freedom. And so you've got these, what's happened is the left in politics has been hijacked. It's not the liberal left that I grew up in. It's not the liberal left that I supported. The liberal left that in the 60s when I was a kid was going on marches demanding freedom of speech. It's now the progressive fake left that goes on marches and protests demanding that freedom of speech is taken away. And so they've got this in their head, not least because that's all they've heard through the school system. We're all going to die. And I'm sure great numbers of people who were shutting the streets of London and are, supporting Ocasio-Cortez and all this stuff, they genuinely believe what they're saying. But they haven't understood it's a hoax and why it's a hoax, and the fact that they are demanding exactly the changes in society that the hoax was played to impose and justify. And if they did, they would realize that they are being played like a stringed instrument.
Because the knee-jerk reaction from some people when they hear the title global warming hoax is that you think that we're not harming Mother Earth, but that's not the case, is it?
I was a national spokesman for the British Green Party. I care deeply about the environment. And you know what's happening, Sean, is that because of this obsession and focus on the hoax of human-caused global warming to justify the centralization of global and national power, other real environmental issues are being marginalized. We're not talking about them. What we're seeing is beautiful landscapes being destroyed by massive wind farms to fight a problem that isn't real. How come temperatures were much higher in the medieval warm period, 800, 1,000 years ago? What caused them? Turbocharged handcarts? Hey? Flatulent cattle? I mean, what caused it? Because it weren't souped up 4x4s, was it? And you notice something else. They keep going on about CO2. CO2! Without CO2, we'd all be dead. Why do you think the plants grow? I mean, and we're breathing it out. Ban breathing CO2, right? And then you look at the greenhouse gas graph. 98% or thereabouts of greenhouse gases holding the heat in, water vapor and clouds. Ban them, I say. Ban them. CO2, tiny smear, and most of that is naturally caused. So let's demonize the gas of life, shall we? Yeah, that's a good one. Keep saying it enough times and they'll believe that it's real, because everyone knows that, because it's all you've ever heard. So the reason, again, they are banning, and I was banned from Australia in part for my views on this, the reason they're banning alternative views on these things is because they can't win the debate. And because they can't win the debate, they shut it down. And you see this all over the place. I was going to say, the one thing you never hear them talk about when they talk about global warming, it's out today.
The sun.
It's a clear blue sky, and it's the sun. Have you noticed that when the sun comes out, it gets warmer? I have noticed that in my life. So, actually, the sun is a source of heat on Earth, and heat warms, which leads us to global warming. Why is the sun left out of it? See, what happened is you had the medieval warm period when temperatures were much higher than they are now. That's when they were, and warm periods have been times of abundance. Times of high carbon dioxide are abundant, because the more you have it, the more the plants grow and the trees grow, the vegetation grows. It's when it's the cold periods that the danger, that's when things die. So you had the medieval warm period, and then we came down into what they call the Little Ice Age. And that was when, it's still portrayed to this day on some Christmas cards, with people skating on the Thames in London, because every year the Thames froze over. They used to have ice fairs on the Thames. It was so cold. This was the Little Ice Age after the medieval warm period. And then it hit the bottom, and it starts to rise up to present day. Now, there was a guy, actually his wife too, often gets forgotten, called Maunder. And they were charting sunspots. This is real. This is the activity of the sun, the energetic activity of the sun expresses itself as sunspots, some of which are, bigger than 3 or 4 Earths, some of them. And the more sunspots, the more active the sun is, the more energy it's projecting, the more heat potentially we get. The fewer the sunspots, the less it's projecting. At the very bottom point of the Little Ice Age, when it's at its coldest, is known to this day in climate science as the Maunder minimum. That's when there was virtually no sunspot activity at all. In other words, the heat coming from the sun was much less. Then it starts to rise. And you know that people keep saying, this is the hottest day since records began. Yeah, okay, so when did records begin? Let's do that. Did they begin in the medieval warm period? Oh no, so when did they begin? And you chart it back, and it was when we were coming out of the Little Ice Age. So many of the comparisons with the highest, all this stuff, highest temperature since records began, you've got to look what the temperatures were when records began. And the climate situation. And I've just read a book recently by a guy called Joe Bastardi. He's a meteorologist in America. Wrote a book called The Climate Chronicles. And he says this global warming is complete tosh. And he's one of these nerdy kind of weather obsessives. Ever since he's been a kid, he's obsessed with weather. So when they were coming out with this, this is global warming, because this is how they do it. Anything, it's hot, isn't it? It's global warming. It's bloody cold, isn't it? It's global warming. And so it goes on, Anyway, he goes back and he's looking at these sequences, which they're now saying is global warming. And he's finding the same sequences in the 1950s, the 1940s, the 1930s, and the 20s. And he points one sequence out. He says when the Atlantic cools or the Pacific cools, a sequence of weather consequences, knock-on, start. When they happened in the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, okay, bit extreme weather, innit? Yeah, yeah. Now it's global warming. We're all gonna die. Now, this is the psychological game. And people have got caught up in it. And the Extinction Rebellion have got caught up in it.
Do you think they get caught up in it because crowd psychology comes into effect and every generation has its own end of the world theory? Going back to the Bible, end of days, bubonic plague, Middle Ages, millennium bug. It just reoccurs throughout history.
Yeah, but if you think about this, if you want to focus the attention of the population behind what you want to happen, what more powerful focus can you have than we're all going to die unless we do this, right? That's what global warming is. We're all going to die unless you do this. Unless you support the centralization of global power to save the world, we're all going to die. And you tell the children, who are going to be the adults, not very long from now, that you're going to die unless this happens. What are the kids going to do? They're going to call for it, aren't they? They're going to berate their parents for leaving them a dying world. We haven't. It's a hoax. And it's a hoax of the classic technique that I came up with in the 1990s. Problem, reaction, solution. This is when you create a problem, You tell the public the version of the problem you want them to believe, so they say something must be done, and then you offer the solutions to the problems you have created. And there's another version which I call no problem reaction solution. That's when you completely invent the problem, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and then do something and you then do what you wanted to do, justified by the no problem. And global warming caused by human activity is a no problem reaction solution. And you can ban me from anywhere. I don't give a shit. I'm going to go on speaking my truth. And if people don't like it, well, they can do the other thing. That's all the same to me.